Welcome to the Happy Doc, the voice of fulfilled physicians. Become a fulfilled physician. Fill yourself up with inspirational, creative, and successful individuals. It's time to be a happy doc. Hello, everyone. I am absolutely excited for your earbuds to listen to this episode. You are in for an amazing ear treat. Trust me on that one. So for this episode, you're going to be listening to Chase Jarvis, and you're going to listen to his bio. You're going to learn about all of his accolades. They're quite impressive. But what I really want you to pay attention to is the idea of creativity and the power of creativity. We're going to be talking about his book, The Creative Calling, and some of the concepts that you might learn if you listen or read this book. Something special about this episode is that we're actually doing a giveaway. We're going to be giving away signed books by Chase Jarvis himself. And the way you're going to participate is pretty simple. If you share this episode and tag us on any social media channel, you will essentially be entering to win. We're going to pick a couple of social media channels or names at random, and then we're going to reach out to you. So if you share this episode, every time you share, you basically put an entry to win. Just please be sure to tag us. Our handle is at Happy Doc Podcast. Also, please tag Chase Jarvis as well. It's at Chase Jarvis. So guys, please share this episode. Please tag us, and you'll get an entry to win the book. My ask of you for this episode is if you get any value in this episode, if you enjoyed it, if you liked listening to it, go ahead and order the book, Creative Calling. There is so much to learn about creativity. Chase is going to talk to us about the book, and I think it's a great opportunity for us to learn about the creative process, understand it, act on it, and enhance our ability to utilize such a beautiful skill. And without further ado, let's listen to the episode. Enjoy.
Hello, everyone. This is another episode of the Happy Doc Podcast. I'm so fired up right now. I'm so excited for our next guest, Chase Jarvis. Just to give you a little bit about him, he is an award-winning artist, entrepreneur, and one of the most influential photographers of the past decade. He has created campaigns for Apple, Nike, Red Bull, and others. He was a contributor to the Pulitzer-winning New York Times story Snowfall, and earned an Emmy nomination for his documentary Portrait of a City. He's also the creator of Best Camera, the first photo app to share images to social networks. He's the founder of Creative Live, where more than 10 million students, 10 million, learn photography, video, design, music, and business from the world's top creators and entrepreneurs. He's a keynote speaker and advisor to Fortune 100 brands, and has been a guest at the Obama White House, the United Nations, the Library of Congress, 10 Downing Street, Buckingham Palace, and DIFC in Dubai. What an amazing set of accolades for Chase Jarvis. Chase, thanks for being on.
I don't know who you're talking about. None of all that shit's made up. No, just kidding, of course. But thank you so much. I appreciate being on the show. And there's a really, what I think is a unique thread that my personal life is intertwined with so many of the people who are listeners to the show. I bailed on medical school at the last possible moment and did all of the prereqs and the interviews and the MCATs and all that stuff, and decided at the last moment that it wasn't for me. And it's not about my decision to not do it. That, I think is obviously that's not the connective thread, but the thread of understanding what that commitment was or is. And you, for example, you knew what that commitment was and you decided to go all in. I realized that commitment much later than I would have liked to. And I, narrowly averted what would have been a really hard go for me. And so there's just enough connection there that I hope that my background as a creator and entrepreneur might come out of left field for some of the folks who are listening, but there's a really important connective thread that I want to help weave throughout our show today that helps people understand why the message that I'm trying to share here is relevant to your community.
Absolutely. And I did choose that commitment personally. It was not rainbows and sunshine, which is why this podcast was actually created. I talk about this a lot on the podcast, but something that this was created from a space of depression, a space of exhaustion, a space of burnout for myself. And so again, we had kind of discussed a little bit before, medicine is a culture right now. 44% of doctors right now, if you take a slither of time, 44% of doctors are currently burnt out. Like in this moment, physicians are twice as likely to kill themselves in comparison to the general population. And again, it's just a very exhausted culture. And one thing that we found in our podcast and discussing this with a lot of guests is that, and this is why I'm so pumped for this episode, is that creativity has definitely been the link that we think is kind of that piece that frees people from that burnout into that next step, that next level. And you are coming out with a book, The Creative Calling, which we are going to discuss, of course. But let's talk about this a little bit. What's the big deal about creativity?
Well, first of all, again, thanks for having me on the show. I respect that population that is so much the overlap with your community of doctors. And I also appreciate and understand burnout culture from tapping into that accidentally myself and having been in the care of lots of physicians. So I do think it's really powerful that your show's addressing this. And I think part of what I'm trying to offer in Creative Calling, and it's been my life's mission with all the stuff that you read in my bio, is it all kind of culminates in us understanding that creativity is very different than I think what we've been sold. We were sold that creativity, especially at a very young age, and probably this may resonate to a lot of the listeners because of the science-heavy aspect of medicine, is that we were told that creativity is popsicle sticks and pipe cleaners and glue in second grade, and that creativity ultimately equaled art. And while that's true, and I think art can be immeasurably powerful, and you can look backwards across cultures and see how it's played in, creativity is actually something much bigger than that. And so that's one foundational principle of the book. The creativity with a capital C, that is putting any two ideas together to form something new and useful, whether that's what you're going to put in your smoothie or, building of nations and everything in between. If you're putting two things together to form something new and useful with a little bit of intention, that's creativity. So while art is a subset, when you start to think about creativity as this unique to human capability, it's a capacity that we have that differentiates us from all the other species. And when you realize there's basically three fundamental principles to the book. One is that there's creativity inside of every person: doctors, firemen or women, astronauts, lion tamers. And all you have to do to know this is to walk into any first grade classroom, say, who wants to come to the front of the room and draw me a picture? Every single hand goes up. No questions, every single hand, even the kid who's in the back picking his nose, like, I want to come up to the front. And that's because that's an innate thing to express ourselves. It's a mechanism for connection, for expression, for becoming part of a community. And yet that becomes something we train out of our culture rather than into, because we ask questions like, what is it good for? How could it be useful? Which leads me to the second principle, which not only is everyone creative, but I believe that creativity is a habit, not a skill. It's a way of thinking and operating, not some end product. I liken it to a muscle, which is the more you use it, the stronger it gets. Mm-hmm. So if you believe, one, that there's creativity in every person, from my very simple litmus test, if you believe, two, that creativity is like a muscle, the last thing is, and this is not going to be a big leap, is that I'm asking you to understand that the things that we do on a daily basis to create, whether that's dinner, a meal, a photograph, even the work that you're doing to build a family or build a practice or build a business, that is creativity in action. And most importantly, the muscles that you use to do that on a small daily basis, the psychological, emotional, neurological things that you put into action when you're doing that, those are the same exact things at play when we decide and we craft the life that we want. It's just creativity at a different scale. And so through the lens of creativity is something much more than art. If you can buy the fact that, like, yeah, I do have agency. I decide what I'm going to create for my day. What am I going to create for breakfast? What's the way that I'm going to, navigate to work? These are all choices that we have. When you start to recognize those as creativity, you start to recognize that, wait a minute, this is agency over my life. So to go back to 30,000 feet for a second, and I think tap into your question, like, what is creativity? That's what it is. I believe if you can accept that definition and that premise, that it's the path to connection, it's the path to fulfillment, it's the path to meaning in our lives, and it's up to us to create all of those things. And not only is it up to us, but we're completely capable. These are gifts that we were given at birth that we all have in us. We've just been trained out of it. And with a little bit of work, we can develop them again and create all of those things, the connection, the fulfillment that we currently lack. And culture in mass is lacking these things. And that's one of the reasons I wrote the book, because it had to be written. And I think it's especially relevant for the medical profession.
I mean, absolutely. I mean, that's why I'm so excited again to talk to you. There's so many threads of conversation I can go with this, but again, like, just to tap back into this with the human self, the human beings, the thing that differentiated us from a long time ago is the fact that we made tools. The fact that we could, create a knife that could, like, go and, like, hunt and attack some giant behemoth, take them down. We built fires. All of this creativity was born into us from an evolutionary perspective. So that's what really differentiates us from the animals to now us as human beings. And even with technology, we're still innovating with entrepreneurship and those things. But to take a step back, you mentioned something that this creativity has been beaten out of us, and you mentioned this a lot in your podcast, and it's what you discuss a lot. Is our education system. And I don't want to harp so much on the education. I want us to talk more about the solutions. But, there is something we can comment on there. In medical school, it's been this really linear path in terms of, you go from college to med school to residency to an attending, and now you have your own practice. That's very linear thinking. That's really ingrained in us. I mean, I'm sure you know well. How does that beat creativity out of us? What is happening there?
Sure. Well, ultimately, creativity is a threat to the system, because creativity is specifically about, unique connections and combining things in unlikely and unanticipated ways to create things that are new and different. And all of those things can somehow challenge any system, especially a linear one. And the reality is there's no evil puppet. And I went through the public school system. My wife, Kate, she's in the other room. She was a public school teacher for a long time. And I believe deeply in not just school stops at 18, but as in lifelong learning. I'm the founder and CEO of an online learning platform where millions of people learn. So education is very, very core to the belief. And while it's sometimes inconvenient to throw rocks at something that does provide some value, I'm not intending to take it down. The goal isn't to undermine any of this. It's just to create an awareness that the system that we have in place currently is made largely on an outdated model that is used to prescribe that system because it was useful for what it wanted the outcomes of its pupils to be. And that is very linear thinking, because it was designed at a time around the factory and the farm. And these were, the school is literally designed after the Prussian model of the factory. So rather than throwing rocks and just ragging on the school system, it just does what it knows. And there's a really cool, I think, sometimes I'll say it cool, but it's just cool is an interesting parallel to school sort of forces the same people who are wildly different backgrounds into the same system. We move through at a certain pace that is determined, that is the average learning arc with the average different types of modalities. That is the average, right? It's just because that's what it serves. It serves a set of averages. Just turns out there's no one person that actually is average, right? The definition of an average is take a bunch of data points and puts it all in a thing, and out comes this answer. But there is no one individual data point that's average, right? So if you apply that to human thinking, you aren't average. You are a unique set of things. And yet culture is telling us all of the things that we need to know. You need to eat like this, walk like this, talk like this, dress like this, go to college, get this kind of a job. And so we're sort of sold a bill of goods that's actually a very narrow expression of what's possible. And so whether it's the school system or the cultural, mass culture that we're a part of, there's no evil genius behind it all, but the result is the same, and that is suboptimal. So I'm asking us to take charge and recognize this for what it is. It's useful in a narrow field to do a certain set of things, but that can't be everything. And I'm encouraging us to strengthen through mindset and through this awareness of our own creative possibilities that you can use those things, but that's not where all of the answers are. And as it turns out, you say, well, then, okay, where are the answers? Most of the answers are in here. And for the listeners at home, I'm tapping on my own chest. And the cool thing about the answers being in here are you haven't been told. It's like it's going to be an immediate unlock for most people because we've been taught that we have to seek the answers, and the answers are out there. The answers are at the end of the formula or at the end of the residency or at the end of the diagnosis or the whatever. And when you start to realize that the answers of what you should be doing, whether that's being a physician or what you should be doing for dinner or for your child or for your career, if we can create an environment where we can acknowledge this and start to listen to that intuition, start to listen to that voice, I talk about that being the calling. And it's never a shout from the mountaintop that says you shall do this. It's a whisper. Even for those of you who wanted to become a doctor, it started off as a whisper. And then it was a little louder, and then you started listening to it and walking towards it. And the same is true in so many areas of life. We're just taught that could be impractical and dangerous and naive to listen to that voice. I want to flip that script and say, no, that's actually a huge benefit if you can start to tune into this calling, and it rarely steers you wrong. So when you go back to your question about it was a big open-ended question, sort of about the role of all this. I think that it's an optimistic point of view and healthy optimism to be able to leverage the school system for what it can offer, but recognize that you have to recognize your own creativity and your role in that to make the most of this thing that you've got, which is one precious life, and that everybody else's shoulds and woulds, we need to develop a muscle for programming against that, for responding to it. And that's just something we haven't been taught or empowered to do.
Right. And I mean, I love what you said, and listening to this whisper and getting in that internal insight that there's something more within you that you might, be able to achieve beyond just what you might have been taught. That's very powerful. In your life, there was that voice that now has created, Creative Live, right? And I know from your story, you had something almost tragic happen to you. And I could not have this interview without discussing the avalanche that you experienced. And, of course you can share as much as you'd like, but how did that, almost near-death experience impact now your future and where you're at today and what you're doing?
Well, some of these things are very inconvenient when they happen to us. And it just so turns out that I can look backwards in my life and look at a bunch of big markers happened with, the passing of people that were very close to me, unexpected death. And then to the point that you mentioned, the story of my own, you can't get much closer to death than well, again, I'll say that you can read the book for the story, but I should be dead by every measure. And those provide useful check-ins in a time where we end up just going through the motions. And as I would describe, sort of responding to all the shoulds and woulds and oughts to a culture, or in the case of, your show, to a profession. And these big moments, they can grab us for a moment, give us just a little space to see some things that we might have been blind to. And they serve a certain utility. What I would like is for people to be able to read the book and not have to have people close to you die, or not have to die yourself. Or sometimes it's the birth that we can change it. Sometimes it's the birth of a child or a promotion at work that gives you more headspace to see the big picture. There are all kinds of other positives, but they tend to be these big milestones. I don't want you to have those big milestones. I want it to be a part of our cultural thinking to empower us to think in a slightly different way about what we actually want for ourselves, the life that we actually want to be leading. Because if you ask the average person during their life, like, are you living the dream? Very few people can say yes to that question. And here's a really interesting thing that will resonate with the listeners is if you survey people on their deathbed, the number one, not 2 or 5 or 10 or 18, number one regret is they lived the life that other people prescribed for them rather than the one that they were supposed to live their own. So this is, the book is about finding ways to express yourself in small creative ways on a lightweight basis and harnessing that same power to create the life that you want. And the reality is that it doesn't have to be hard. It can be joyful, and it can be, it can bring about a lot of happiness. It can bring about a lot of the connection and remove a lot of the negatives, remove isolation, remove loneliness. And in fact, like if creativity is this thing that, as you said in your sort of intro salvo, is what differentiates us from all these other species. Well, certainly it's our job to put it to work. If it's the one unique gift, so maybe another one is language, right? The ability to, like, if you go back to Noam Chomsky or some other scientists, like that's another thing we're hardwired for. Like those are things that we're social animals. That creates connection. Our ability to make tools and make houses and make lives is actually what can dovetail us and connect us with others, other humans.
Right. I mean, absolutely. Absolutely. And there's just something so special about what your book and what you're doing right now is allowing our consciousness, really like our bigger picture, to really tap into. This is the first time in life I've been able to hop into my car and listen to you on the way to work. You know what I mean? Like the technology now is absolutely crazy. And that's why I'm also really excited about Creative Live, because you're offering these top level executives, entrepreneurs, marketers, all these people, and we can tap into this digital space. It's just never been available. So creativity is now, you mentioned this too, is at scale, and it allows us to really tap into this at a new level that's going to change the game. I mean, we're already in a disruptive period, so my mind blows up thinking about it all the time. But, you mentioned, just to take a step back, you mentioned that creativity is a muscle. And as much as I like to go pie in the sky about this, I'm also very pragmatic, and I would love for our team to get really pragmatic tools about, again, your minutes become hours, your hours become days, your days become weeks, months, and years, months become years become the whole lifetime. So what can we do today? What are you cultivating? What are you utilizing to tap into that creativity muscle that, our listeners today can really take use of?
Well, I think that is a absolutely fantastic and foundational question. And I want to, reiterate something I said in passing earlier, that creativity does not mean you need to jettison your life. It doesn't mean you need to move to Paris and wear a beret and, it's not get the image of a starving artist and the image of a painter covered in, oil paints. Like that's not at all what I'm talking about. But I would instead invite everyone to think of something that brought them joy as a kid. I'll give you one example. For me, I loved film, and I loved shows, and I set out once to I was about 8, and I set out to make a film with my friends in the neighborhood, and we washed cars to make enough money to buy Super 8 film. We borrowed a camera and talked one of my friend's brothers into filming it, and we wrote a little screenplay. We acted it out, and props and the whole deal with the money that we had made. And we made this film. Of course, it was terrible, beautiful, but terrible. And then we screened it in the neighborhood, and we bought candy, and then we sold candy, and we actually made a profit. We spent less money than we made on this first film that I ever made as an 8-year-old. And then fast forward just a short while, that was summertime. And then fast forward to the school year where Ms. Kelly, my teacher that year, it was grade 2nd or 3rd grade, I think. And I overheard her at a parent-teacher conference telling my mom that I was better at sports than I was at art. And as a social animal who just wants to fit in and be loved and recognized and seen. What do? I stopped doing magic and writing my comic strip, and I certainly didn't make any films. I went right to whatever someone else told me was practical.
Mm-hmm.
And then rather than those photographs of me and my friends in all our costumes, and instead of the blurry, fast motion sort of 8mm film that you're seeing in your mind right now, I traded that in for all of the shoulds and the woulds that everybody else wanted from me. And I can't say it was bad. I ended up going to college on a soccer scholarship. I played for the Olympic development team. It provided a lot of opportunity. And yet I had still denied a really important part of myself. And so at some point, in this case, it was another traumatic event. My grandfather dropped dead of a heart attack completely out of the blue. No one anticipated it. And this was horrible. A week before my college graduation, the silver lining was that I got his cameras. And it was that moment of trauma combined with the fact that I was actually given a tool that I chose to start expressing myself. And it was basically a reconnection to that 8-year-old me. And so to go full circle on your question, the answer is usually in our past. It's something that brought us joy. And for me, when in one case it was a video camera or a film camera, in this case it was an actual camera, like a still camera. But there were hints there that that's something that brought me joy. And so I just started exploring that for no other reason. I didn't know in my heart that I wanted to be a photographer, but you don't have to. And I think that's the thing that for a culture that is sold that we need to be perfect, images in society tell us that we couldn't be further from the truth. We need to pursue our curiosity and our joy and the things that we can look backwards, because we've all had these moments where we were in flow, where it felt great. And the people that we were with were the people that helped our heart sing. And we were doing things that brought us joy. And you're told a lie in culture that's whimsical and naive, maybe even stupid to pursue those things. And I think just the opposite, that's where the gold is. And you don't have to do these things as a career, but you have to do them, because to ignore your creativity is to betray that 8-year-old self. And at the end of your life, if you're sitting on your deathbed, are you going to wish that you betrayed that 8-year-old? No, because it's not about getting another degree to hang on the wall. It's about joy and connection and fulfillment. And these are things that don't necessarily come with profession. And they say our lives have two arcs, right? One arc is acquisition of knowledge, of information, of skills, of wealth, of people. And the second arc I like to think of is actually giving back. And so if you're giving back unto yourself, giving back unto the people around you, giving back unto that 8-year-old that you have denied for one reason or another, social programming, what's in your past that you can pick up and find joy? Did you enjoy baking those little brownies in that little fake oven that the neighbor down the street had? Do you enjoy baking now? Was it the guitar? We all have something that is a small daily creative practice, gardening, coding, all these things. We can do all these things, and they don't need to be something that you drop everything and then you only do this. What can you do for 5 minutes? Journaling every morning if you love to write. There's some way to find a thing to tap into. And then here's the crazy thing about the brain that your medical community will appreciate through neuroplasticity. Actually, playing the guitar makes you a better surgeon. Like, wow. You're rewiring your brain for possibility, for openness, for connecting notes in new and novel ways. So the cool thing is you start to see this practice really quickly. My mom, 65 years old, thought she wasn't creative her whole life. I gave her an iPhone and a $2 app. She started taking pictures. In a matter of weeks, not months or years, went to loving it and believing that she was a really creative person, and it transformed her life. So the practicality and the opportunities are all around us. They're hiding in plain sight. We've just been taught to ignore them. And if you started listening and looking for some of those things and doing them, there's going to be something that sparks joy.
Amazing. And I love that idea that you offered, which is like, it doesn't have to be this woo-wah crazy out there thing. Yeah. Look inside and figure out what are the things that you really enjoyed. Something I don't share often, but I'll tell you, like, one of the things I really loved as a kid was like just singing in the shower. Right. Mm-hmm. And I love doing that. I love trying to make lyrics in the shower, doing the whole thing. But my little me, the little part of me, the fear me, was so scared to ever sing in public or to start to do music. Now only recently am I starting to write lyrics and
create music and all that stuff, right? So that's an area I do want to explore further. But I mean, we could have a whole, again, fear is a whole book or series of books, but we're not going to get into that right now. But, just to say, I mean, I think that's really special and it's something valuable that, our listeners will definitely get. So your book is coming out, The Creative Calling, September 24th. You're absolutely going to make a big impact with that, I'm sure. What are some things that we can really look forward to digging into into that book?
Well, I think you could couch these ideas in a lot of different areas in personal development or vision quest or any of these catchy phrases. I've chose to couch it in creativity because I think, not dissimilar to language, that it's so fundamental. And it's a thing we haven't been told, that the same muscles that we use to make dinner are the ones that we use to make our lives. And so I'm hoping that it's not seen as some stuffy treatise on creativity. That's not at all what it is. It's a super practical sort of guide for how to take the first couple steps. Know that I can't provide a roadmap. And I personally dislike any book that tells me that I have to, that if you take your perfect life and you take these 4 perfect steps, then you'll get the perfect life plus X. Mm-hmm. And I'm trying to lay it out from, no, I made all the mistakes you can make. And the people that I have interviewed for the book, hundreds and hundreds of the top performers and the world's most creative and entrepreneurial minds, I could list them and it would, I think it would be impressive, but I'll skip it. There's a very simple foundational aspect to the success that they've had and that I've been able to sort of unearth and through talking to them, that I witnessed in my own expression and that I think will resonate with folks in the book. And it's a repeatable system. It's a way of looking at the world. It's a simple framework. It doesn't provide all the answers, but provides guideposts to do that. So it's, the other books that I've read about creativity, having been an artist my whole life, and they always were so highbrow, and creativity was treated as that special thing where it was a talent that only a few people had, and we know that that's not the case. So this is just like Jane or Joe on the street approach to unlocking their potential through a handful of simple habits. And the thing that I would, the last thing I'll say to that question is what I've found in deconstructing my own experience and the experience of so many others is that the gap between there is a gap for most of us between where we are and where we want to be. Whether that you measure it in time to get there or the outcome or money it costs to transition out of one career to another, or get a new house or move across the country or whatever. I can't tell you how long or how far that distance is, but I can tell you that the number of decisions you are away from that life that you seek, it's a handful. Very, very simple handful. 3, 4, 5. These are not it's mind-boggling when you realize how close that. Sure, all those other things have to happen. You have to sell the house and pack the car and, and get a new job or whatever the thing is. But the number of decisions are few, and you can make a decision in a moment. So what I look at this book is helping you reorient to this part of yourself using science and a very simple sort of framework for how to think about it. And then you can make a couple of those decisions that will put you on the trajectory that I think we all seek, which is a trajectory of being in charge of our own life and taking agency over it, of connecting and finding meaning in this world. And to me, that's reassuring.
Yeah. I mean, that's powerful. It's really powerful that, you can offer some of those insights. And again, you said it, creativity is within all of us, but if we can have a tool to kind of, again, reorient ourselves, get us back on track, flip around our thinking, I think that's going to be a great tool. It's one of the reasons I pre-ordered the book.
Thank you.
Absolutely. I'm a big fan of Audible, and I'm glad that it's available on there. So again, I'm a big fan of listening to books on the road. 2 more brief questions. Number 1, how can people reach out to you?
I'm just at Chase Jarvis on the internet at ChaseJarvis on Insta, on YouTube, Twitter, Facebook, all those places. Creative Live, you've mentioned it a bunch of times. That's just Creative Live. That's where, people like Richard Branson and Brene Brown and Tim Ferriss, and you can get content from them. We've, tens of millions of users. It's an amazing, vibrant community. There's free content there. But, my focus right now is all of the tools and things that I've created in my life are really like, this is the exclamation point, this book. It's the best work I've done because it puts all this stuff into perspective, and it's the why. All those are tools and tactics, and they're valuable. This is the why, and gives you a framework for sort of attacking all those things. So that's just at wherever you want to buy a book, and ordering it online is helpful. And there is a little treat if you buy a pre-order a book before the 24th, or maybe a couple days after that. We'll keep it open. And you go to creativelive.com/calling. You can get a class where yours truly is going to basically go the next level. And the only way you can do that is if you pre-order the book. So check that out. And, you said something there right at the end that I want to comment on before you ask me the last question.
Sure.
And, it's, I want to come at it from a very imperfect place. And I don't want to provide all the answers, and I can't. But what I can do is remind us that the shoulds in life never go away, and the pressures in your spouse and your partner and your business partner and your kid and your career counselor and your teacher, they're always going to be putting their woulds and shoulds in your lap. And that's fine. The thing that I would ask is that you don't betray that 8-year-old. You don't betray the person who's going to be on their deathbed at some point looking backwards. And the mechanism for not betraying them is very, very simple. It's to get in tune with some of these really simple philosophies and simple daily actions. I'm not asking you to do anything, but recognize this and just do something for 5 to 10 minutes every day. It becomes a habit.
Right.
So sorry to get fired up, but so we're on this cusp of we're just on the cusp of a revolution, I feel like. So I'm excited and if you want to give me some feedback or shout out, take a picture with the book, I'll be sharing all that stuff on social.
I'm looking forward to the little gift as well. No big deal. Pre-ordered it. It's going to be amazing, I'm sure. So my last question is, how do my listeners serve you today?
It's just tuning into the book. Honestly, I feel like once you understand the book, tapping into Creative Live and the videos that I make on the internet and the communities around all this stuff, it'll be a natural for whom knows it's a fit. But that's, just support on that and, share the idea. I think that the idea, us acknowledging as a culture that we are all creative, especially those folks who've been told that they're not, when, if they can awaken to this just by listening to this or by reading the book or, by continuing to follow your show, start to own it, because words matter. They matter deeply to our psychology, and the most important words of the universe are the ones we tell ourselves. So
powerful. Well, education is one of the greatest, I think, hacks to really taking things to the next level in your life. It's something you're offering for free, again, at scale. You're offering this book that's going to be amazing, I'm sure. I'm looking forward to it, September 24th. Chase Jarvis, thank you so much for being on the Happy Doc podcast. I was super pumped to have you on. I'm definitely excited that I had you on. You've provided so much value to our audience. And thank you for your time, because time is one of the most precious commodities that we have. We don't know when it's going to end for us. And you've provided, your time today. So I appreciate you and your time.
I want to recognize you and the community you've built. Thank you very much. Doctors are so important to our world. And it's not lost on me for a second, having done a lot of the early prep work and then relied on physicians throughout my life in different capacities to both, help me and family members and people close to me. I just want to say thanks back to you.
Amazing. Well, take care.
Thanks, bud. Appreciate it.
If this episode provided you any value, please leave us a 5-star review on iTunes. It's one of the best ways to support us. Please check out MedFlashGo. MedFlashGo is the first voice-based interactive medical question bank for medical students. It helps students study on the go using Amazon Alexa. To learn more, check out medflashgo.com. Thanks for tuning in to the Happy Doc podcast. I wish you an amazing day.